Today's lesson is on bonds. We're going to learn about them, price them, and record them. Bonds are interest-only loans, so you just pay interest during the loan and then repay the principal balance at maturity at the end of the loan. Bonds are typically issued in $5,000 increments, and they are sold to the public and publicly traded after that. Here's a typical bond. I promise to pay $5,000 at maturity, and in the meantime, I'm going to pay 4% interest every 6 months. Now, that's not 4% every 6 months. That's 4% annually paid in 6 months. So it's really 2% twice a year. It's just the pattern for them. So if you're going to sign 2,000 of these and issue to the public, what are you going to get? Well, assuming that they like your 4%, and then they would give you $5,000 for each of those. So you get $10 million that you'd have to repay at the end of the loan. And then each bondholder would get a check for $100 every 6 months during the whole life of the loan. All right, let's record it. Here's the cash that you're going to get, and you record the liability. And then at the interest payment date, you're going to pay each of those 2,000 bondholders $100. What's it going to look like on the second interest payment date? That's right, it's going to look just like the first interest payment date. Interest-only notes, where there's no difference between the market rate and the promise rate or the note face rate, it's no change. All the interest payment dates look exactly the same, and the liability just stays the same on the balance sheet. There's no changes to it. It's just sitting there. All right, why don't you try one of these first before we get into the fancy kind of bonds? How would you record this? Make the entries. That's right, you got cash coming in, $5,000 for each of those 900 bonds. And then at the first interest payment date, you're going to be writing a check for $135,000. Now, the comment, assuming they were happy with the 4% interest rate, is not really a very good assumption. It takes many months to pull a bond issue together and write all those documents. And in the meantime, the market interest rate has probably fluctuated. So once you've printed up the bond promise, it doesn't change. What changes, though, is what a bondholder is willing to give you when you issue that bond, because the bondholder wants the market rate of return. You have the skills to calculate the value of a bond promise. So what you do is you look at the promise that's written in the document and you discount that promise back at market rate. So in this case, the market rate has changed to 8% since the bond was pulled together. So let's go calculate what this bond might be worth when the market rate is 8%. All right, the bond promise has two pieces to it, right? It's got the repayment at the end, and it has the interest only during the life of the bond. So here we can go get the factors. The repayment just happens once, but the interest happens over and over, so it's an annuity. So we get the present value of those two pieces of the promise, and we add them together, and so we get the value of the total bond promise, which is the interest plus the repayment at the end. So a bondholder will give you $4,321 for these bonds, and they'll get an 8% return out of that. Notice that the change in the market interest rate did not change the interest payments. The interest payments are determined by what's printed on the bond promise. All right, well, now let's record this bond where we didn't get $5,000 when we issued it. We got something else because the market rate of interest was different. We record the cash we got, $4,321 per bond. We've got to record the full liability because we've got to repay the full $5,000. The difference, discount on bonds payable. This discount on bonds payable is the shortfall between the cash you got and the liability you're going to have to repay at the end. What if the market rate has fallen since the bond was put together? Then the investors are going to pay more than $5,000. Here's just an example of recording where they've paid more. The cash is greater than the $5,000 that you've got to repay at the end, and you have a premium on bonds payable account. So when the market rate has fluctuated from the face rate, you'll have either a discount or a premium on bonds payable. And those accounts are amortized into interest expense over the life of the loan. So they either increase or decrease interest expense. They do not impact the interest payment. The interest payment is the bond promise that's printed on the note. All right, calculating interest expense. We have to go get the bond book value, and the bond book value is the $5,000 liability plus or minus any discount or premium that you got because the market rate had migrated on you. And then you use the market interest rate for expense. Payments always use the face rate times the face amount. All right, here's a calculation with some of an Excel spreadsheet for you. Notice the interest payments stay the same, but the interest expense changes because the bond book value changes. The bond book value starts out at the cash you got, and then as there's a difference between interest expense and interest payments, that discount or premium moves over the life of the bond. All right, here's the calculation. Net book value times the market rate of interest, not the face rate, times the 6/12 because it's for 6 months. And then, of course, the difference between the check you write and the interest expense changes that discount. And you can see in Excel, if you can see those numbers are kind of small, how it moves a little bit each time because the net book value is changing. All right, you try this bond. Calculate the value, see if you can do the entries. Okay, here's the present value of the interest stream and the present value at maturity using the market interest rates. Should not surprise you that it's more than 5,000. Okay, so here's the 6,201 you got per bond. You only have to repay the 5,000, so you have a premium on bonds payable. All right, the interest expense is going to be based on that bond book value times the market rate. And then you're going to update your bond book value for the next interest expense calculation. Here it is in Excel. It's very helpful to put it in Excel and watch it kind of motor along each period, and you can see how the premium and the discounts go down over the life of the loan, life of the bond. So this tutorial was on bonds. There's one on periodic payments and one on lump sum, so you can compare and contrast these classic kinds of notes.